guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I have got another top 5 magic review for you guys. Today I'm going over my picks for the top 5 business card envelope peaks. Now a little background information for you guys. Recently a friend of mine demonstrated for me a peak that he recently purchased, and unfortunately it really was rubbish. It was a terrible peak and definitely wouldn't fool anyone. It didn't fool me, and I think my buddy had a little bit of buyer's remorse. I mean, the idea that he was holding on to a stack of business cards and then putting a huge white envelope in front to ask a person to select a rubber band that was in there. Personally, for me, it felt like the routine was structured to motivate the actions necessary for the peak. And so because of that, that's part of the reason why I decided I was going to do this review. The other reason was because a well-known reviewer of Mentalism products recently reviewed this peak here on YouTube, and the creator asked him to take it down. So I really thought that that was horrible, because we should be able to review products that we want to without having to worry about a creator telling us or asking us to remove it, because it does take a significant amount of time to do these reviews for people. I don't know if they even realize that. And so a product should really stand on its own. And the fact that you're going to find that a lot of times people will try to get as many famous mentalists to say something positive about their product to try to convince the world that this is a great product. You shouldn't have to convince anybody anything. It should stand on its own. You know, good mentalism is something that you learn slowly over time, and there are those people that are just gifted at it, that they're really good at doing character reads of people. They don't need clever gimmicks, you know, clever scripting and interesting ideas to present mentalism. But for the rest of us that are more, you know, normal humans, we do sometimes need, you know, products that are going to work for us to help facilitate us, so that way we can perform the mentalism that we want to. Anyway, those are the main reasons why I decided I was going to do this review. And before we get started, I'm going to mention to you guys that my favorite business card envelope peak, or my favorite envelope peak, is the one that I actually gave away back in June. You guys may remember here, I'm going to just show you guys, here's a link to the video that I put out where I gave away my unbiased envelope peak. I gave that away to 3 people, and that was a peak that I came up with because it met the criteria that I was looking for, which was a peak where a person could write something on a card, business card, and put it inside an envelope themselves, and you seemingly never touch it, yet you could still read their mind. And you know, I'm proud to tell you guys that the people that I gave it away to really liked it a lot. I got a lot of positive feedback, and I may do another giveaway of that in the near future. So this top 5 review, excluding that peak, this is my top 5 review of commercial peaks that are available to you guys that use envelopes, of course. So we're going to go into a couple of notable mentions, and then I'm going to go into the criteria of how I came up with this list of top 5 envelope peaks. So a couple of notable mentions for you guys. The first one is going to be Dan Dent and his peak, the Covert peak. This is a peak, it's an excellent peak, but it didn't meet the criteria for the top 5 list because it doesn't really use a billet or a card. It uses a folded up piece of paper, but it is really a slick peak. I think it's really workable and something that you may want to take a look at, which is why it is a notable mention here. My second notable mention for you guys is a peak that recently came out by Jamie Dawes, which was called Steel. And I think that some people will probably think it belongs on the top 5 list, which obviously is why I'm mentioning it here as a notable mention. It is actually a peak that uses 2 envelopes and a business card. But for me personally, I had a hard time with it because there is some movement, a lot of noise, and you're getting the peak at a moment where people are watching you and it looks like you're doing something. And so when I road tested it, I had the feedback on more than one occasion that the spectator didn't know what I was doing, but they thought that I saw the information when I did, quote unquote, the move. They didn't know what I did, but they knew I did something. And the reason is because there's a lot of movement and some noise in that moment when you get the peak. And for that reason is why this doesn't meet the top 5 on my list. Although for you, you may really like it a lot. You may think that it belongs on the top 5 list. I have a lot of friends that really like it a lot. It is a very clever peak and something that you may want to take a look at. And then finally, the last notable mention I'm going to mention to you guys is a envelope peak that came out by Julio Montoro, which was called Mind Device. This is a really clever idea too, and this idea was that, you know, a spectator writes something on their business card, they insert it into your envelope, or you insert it in there face down, and then seemingly you're never going to be able to see their information until you take it out again. The issue with it was that the gimmick is really not something that the spectator can even look at. And the reason why I don't mention it as part of the top 5 is because the reality is one side of the envelope you can't even really let them look at. You can only flash it really quick at them. And because of that, it's really not a great gimmick. And personally, I really wouldn't recommend that to you guys, although I just mention it here as a notable mention because I know a lot of people that they like how the gimmick works. They think it's really clever, especially because it works together with a stack of business cards in a really sneaky way. But that being said, it's got a lot of angle restrictions and the spectator really cannot look at the envelope closely at all, or they'll immediately see that it looks kind of funny, so to speak. So those are a couple of notable mentions for you guys. All right, so let's get into the criteria that I used for this top 5 review. I centered this criteria around 3 main things. So the first thing was that we're using the idea of the person's writing their information on a business card or on a billet that's going to go inside of a small envelope, preferably like a pay envelope or something that you can carry in your pocket. The second criteria was that there are no switches, meaning that we're not using any shacks and flap envelopes. We're not going to be giving them an envelope to hold on to that has a dummy billet in it. Their card is really going to go in the envelope there, and so that's the second criteria. And then the third criteria is that immediately when the reading or the routine is over, you're going to be able to immediately hand them back the business card so they could take it home with them. So that was the criteria that I used. Of course, remember, there are thousands of peaks out there and probably hundreds of peaks that use envelopes. I've selected these based on things that I found over the years in books, lectures, magazines, standalone items, as you guys would expect, because that's always how I do my top 5 reviews. And of course, these are all peaks that I've used extensively, which is why I've included them here. And many of these are peaks that I keep going back to again and again. Now, I've organized this in terms of least to most favorite, although again, I like all of them, as you're going to notice. Starting out with number 5 on my list of top 5 business card envelope peaks, we have the Reader's Envelope by Louis Laval. Now you can pick this up for $9. You're going to get an instructional video where you're going to learn how to make this envelope, which if you are arts and craftsy type person and you have like a paper cutter at home and you have a hole puncher, then it probably would take you about 15 to 17 minutes to make one of these. If you don't have those tools at home, it might take you more around like 25 minutes or so to make it. The good news is that once you make it, it will last a really long time. This one is my second one that I've made. The first one lasted quite a while, but then it broke down with use. And this one, I've been using it ever since. I haven't really performed it recently too much, but to give you an idea of how this works, the ideas of this is as follows. You take out this envelope, you explain to the spectator that you've got this envelope and you got some cards inside. They can see that. You take one out, you tell the spectator that you want them to think of someone that's important to them or whatever you do for your routine. You have them place it into the envelope face down. What I like to do at that point is I'll tell the person to hold out their hand, and then I tell them, look, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have you hold on to it, and then you hand it to them, you have them hold on to it in between their hands, which is really a great little thing there. And then you read their mind. Now, immediately afterwards, you take it back, you explain to them, hey, you could have written anything here, how crazy is that? You could take out their card and give it right back to them. Now, this envelope was the origin of the Orphic wallet. And a lot of you have asked me why, what about the Orphic wallet? Did you pick it up? Did you buy it? And the reality is no, I didn't, because I didn't want to spend $80 for another Peak wallet that I have to reopen to get the Peak. And the truth of the matter is that this reader's envelope, it uses the same exact mechanisms, but it's a fraction of the cost really for it. And because the Peak is so innocent, because you're just holding in your hand like this as you're getting the Peak, the spectator's never ever going to see anything. And I really do like that idea of putting it in their hands. Once I've gotten the Peak, I will hand it to them and have them hold it in their hands as I'm, reading their mind, because then it feels like I had no control over it, and it gives me an excuse to pick it up out of their hands, which you need to, so that way you can immediately hand them back their card. So if you are looking for a relatively inexpensive envelope Peak that's really diabolical, then this is definitely something you should check out. And the beauty of it is that when it wears out, you can just make another one really easily. If you are worried that it looks a little bit weird because it doesn't look like a normal envelope, people don't question it. And the performances that I've had with it when I road tested it a lot, I didn't even try to justify it. I would just take it out, show it to them, and say, we're going to try something. I want you to think of a person, or whatever was the presentation that I used at the time. And I would give them a card, and they could clearly see that the card was going into the envelope, and obviously it's not going to be reopened again. And so for that reason, it really looks like a natural Peak, because the person is going to see the card inside the envelope the whole time. So it doesn't look like there's any way you could have seen anything, which is great. I really like it a lot, which obviously is why this is number 5 on my list. I think that's something you may want to check out. And just touching back on the Orphic wallet, I would recommend that if you're looking for a good Peak wallet, that you look for one that you don't have to reopen to get the Peak. And there are lots of them out there. Like, just to throw out a couple names for you guys, there's the Viper wallet, Alias wallet, the Jax wallet, Luch's Blink wallet. There's tons of these wallets that exist now that you don't have to reopen them to get the Peak, and I just think that's so much stronger. If you are looking for a wallet that you have to reopen to get the Peak, even the old Stealth Assassin wallet is still a really good option. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. Moving along to number 4, we have a Peak that I recently went over in my last top 5 reviews, which is the Imperium envelope by Muhammad Khalid, and this was published in Jack Goldstein's book called Pantera. Now, since I did that review, actually some people have actually messaged me, and they've had other ideas of how to improve the principle of that envelope, which is really great. It's nice to see that people are brainstorming ideas. Now, the strength of that envelope and that idea of that Peak is that it's very innocent. The spectator can handle the envelope themselves. They're not going to find anything. And yet it looks like all they're doing is writing something on a card. It's going in the envelope, and then you're going to read their mind is literally what it is. And it's really great because it really does go inside the envelope. And at the end, you could even let them take it out of the envelope if you want to. So I really liked it a lot, and I've had a lot of good success with it, which is why obviously I'm recommending it to you guys. In fact, if you just put a little bit of thought behind it, you could easily come up with other ideas of how to improve the envelope too. Although just the way it is now, it is completely workable. Anyway, that is number 4 on my list of top 5 business card envelope Peaks. All right, guys, moving along to number 3, we have a really old business card envelope Peak that doesn't use any gimmicks, just uses some clever maneuvering and just a very little bit of sleight of hand, and you're going to get a really good Peak. And this is from Gene Grant. This was published in his book, Fantini's Lost Book of Mental Secrets. That was like back in 1955. You will find in there is a routine that's called message reading without a clue. And in there he describes a Peak that is done with simply a pay envelope and a business card spectator's asked to write or draw something there, and then it is placed immediately into the envelope. You can have the spectator initially outside of the envelope, and then you can read their mind. You never even have to touch it ever again, which it's a very, very clever peek. It works really good for numbers and pictures. I had a hard time with it with words because the peek is done so quickly. And if you're interested, this was actually updated. This was updated by another mentalist that has vastly improved the peek. I'm actually not going to expose it here and mention that on this review because I think that you guys need to do a little digging yourself and find stuff, but I'm sure you'll easily find the source that I'm talking about. If you can't find it and you are a subscriber to my channel, you can message me and I will help you out so you can learn about it, because the updated handling really does kind of clean up a little bit of the issues with the original. Although keep in mind that without the original, you would never have that updated handling anyway. And so if you can track it down, I think it's definitely worth it because this is completely ungimmicked. And it's so clever. You're so far ahead of the spectator. Everything looks completely innocent and everything, as usual, is completely motivated. I like it a lot because it's just another tool in your arsenal, especially if you have another spectator that wants to participate and you just have your envelopes and some business cards. That's all you need to do this. You're ready to roll at any time, which is why this is number 3 on my top 5 business card envelope peeks. Moving along to number 2, we have an envelope peek that is a favorite of mine. I've actually recommended it to you guys in the past, but I'm going to reiterate it again because it is that strong. And this is a business card envelope peek that Mark Paul put out, which he called it Challenge Mind Reading. I think it was called, yeah, Challenge Mind Reading was the routine that he called it on his Penguin Live lecture. Now, I've been using this for almost 7 years now, and I always carry it with me because it is so strong. It's such a good test conditions envelope peek because you tell a spectator that you got an envelope, you ask them if they know what's inside. They can't see what's inside, obviously. Then you show them that you've got another envelope inside. And you say, do you know what's inside this envelope? Of course, they're going to say they don't know. Then you show them that there's a business card inside. So now you've already conditioned them to see that there's no way that they could know what's inside these envelopes. You have them write down the name of their high school sweetheart or whatever you want. It goes back inside the first envelope, which goes back inside the second envelope. And under these conditions, you could still read their mind. I usually like to let the spectator hold on to the envelope. Either that or else I'll just put it away because you don't need it anymore anyway. And then you could read their mind, completely amaze them. It will leave your spectators, as they say, nonplussed. They're going to be in a state where they're going to have no idea what happened. How is that possible? It's going to really mess with their minds. It's so strong that I always carry it with me all the time. So that way, just in case, you know, you always want to be ready to go. So I know that Mark Paul had mentioned that the actual principle, he actually got it from Animan. Animan's the one that actually came up with the principle. At least he's the one that it's attributed to. But it is a very old principle, but I really do like how Mark Paul has applied it here in this routine. So for me, this is number 2 on my list of business card envelope peeks, and I urge you to check it out if you haven't checked it out before. Again, I did mention it here on my channel like at least 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm still using it, which shows you why it's so strong. All right, moving along to number 1, my number 1 pick for the top envelope peek that uses business cards, and this goes to Felix Schellenberg with his Matty envelope. Now, this is an extremely clever idea. And it goes like this. So you take out some envelopes and you're going to give your spectator a business card. They're going to write or draw whatever they want. It's going to go back inside of the envelope. You can let them lick it closed or whatnot. You can immediately hand it to them. They're going to hold on to it. And then under those conditions in real time, you can immediately read their mind. They can take the envelope home with them if you want them to. They can open it up at home, or right there if you want, they're going to find their business card inside of it that they drew on. There's nothing else to find. The spectator's going to have no idea how it's possible that you knew what they were thinking of. Now, there is a small amount of arts and crafts involved, but it's really not too much. It's really worth it. You can pick this up from library.com for, I think, $25 is what it cost. So definitely well worth it, because you're going to be getting a business card envelope peek that seems unreal. There's a couple of other items you're going to have to buy to be able to do this, but they're all relatively inexpensive, and you may actually have some of them already laying around at home. The beauty of this is it seems like that this is the type of peek that you should only be able to get with like an electronic device. That's really how strong this is, because to the spectator, they're immediately going to see that they can put their card themselves. They can like feed it into the envelope themselves. You're going to immediately hand them the envelope, and they're going to be holding on to it the whole time. So they're going to have no clue how it's possible that you could read their mind, and yet you still read their mind, which is why this is number one on my list, because it feels completely hands off, and it feels like they had complete control of it the whole time. The beauty of it is that you can just really focus on your presentation. There's no sleight of hand or difficult moves or anything like that. And there's nothing that the spectator is going to find, because they're left with the envelope. And like I said, they could take that home if they want to, or do whatever they want with it. They're never going to find the secret. At least I've never had anyone come to me later and tell me that they knew how it was possible. And I think it's just the hands-off nature that makes it so devastating. Anyway, as you guys can see, there's a lot of good options for business card peeks with envelopes. I really sincerely hope that this top 5 review has piqued your interest and showed you some different options that exist out there that you may want to pick up. And hopefully this will help you so you don't make bad investment choices, and that way you don't have any buyer's remorse and buy some peek that later on you're going to say, oh my God, that's just so silly. Like, I can't believe somebody's actually trying to sell that, you know? So that is the main reason why I try to do these reviews, to help you guys out. Anyway, as usual, if you guys have any questions, comments, if you think that I've missed something, just leave us a comment below. Remember, I don't own everything, right? And so these top 5 reviews come from those items that I own, that I've purchased, that I've used over the years. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and I will see you on the next review.